Let's start the programme with statistics on the number of homeless deaths. Therese Coffey, an estimated 726 homeless people died in England and Wales last year, according to figures out today from the Office for National Statistics. That's an increase of 22% on the year before, the biggest increase since records began in 2013. Is there any way to describe this other than shocking?
I think it's exceptionally sad, and I'm conscious over 600 of those are men, and it seems that the main driver for this is people basically dying from drug poisoning. But I want to recognise that the Rough Sleeping Initiative was started to be rolled out last year. There's about £1.5 billion going into the strategy to support that, as well as the Homeless Prevention Reduction Act. But absolutely, it's 724 deaths too many, and we want to tackle that.
Helen, the region with the second highest number of deaths among homeless people is here in the northwest. Does that shock you?
Does it shock me? No. I've lived here for the last 7 years, and I've seen it with my eyes. Every time I walk from Manchester Piccadilly Station to our office on Deansgate, you sort of run the gauntlet of homeless people, people on Spice, formerly Legal High, over the last 9 years since the Tories came to power, we know that homelessness is up 500% in Manchester alone. So I see it every day. It doesn't mean I don't feel incredibly saddened by it, but it doesn't shock me anymore.
What do you think is the cause of that increase?
Well, it's not an easy thing to explain. I mean, welfare cuts has certainly played a huge role, austerity definitely, cuts to drug and alcohol services, but it's not as simplistic as saying it's all the Tories' fault and it's all happened in the past 9 years, because these people who are dying, they're dying. The average age for a man who dies on the street is 45 and a woman is 43, so that's like 35, 40 years less than the average, and their problems began in many cases in the womb. You know, they've often come from very troubled families, very often been in care, so it's overly simplistic, I think, to just blame one administration for it.
All right, well, let's have a look, though, of the level of increase, because it is extremely stark. We can show our viewers and our guests the estimated deaths among homeless people, and it's gone up over the last 6 years from 482 to 726. That's a rise of over 50% in 6 years, with a particularly big increase this year. Why do you think it's happening? Helen talks about austerity and welfare policies. You are the welfare secretary.
I don't think it is that issue there, and I don't pretend to know the ins and outs of exactly why, in particular, why drug overdoses seem to be the driving factor.
But what about welfare cuts and austerity?
Well, I actually think that we have continued to have a compassionate welfare system. We are taking proactive action with the Rough Sleeping Initiative, which is actually performing better than was expected within a year. But there is more to do, and that's why we are working on it.
Helen?
Sorry, compassionate is not a word that I would use to describe the Conservatives' welfare policy. I think it's been willfully cruel in many cases, particularly universal
Helen,
credit.
You're better off in work than if you don't work, unless you cannot work. And then we have put more money into supporting the most vulnerable people in society, without question.
Why the increase?
Well, I think it needs investigating to understand what is going on, but definitely one of the challenges is about people, more and more, the driver is about people dying from drug poisoning, and that's something that needs to be investigated.
What is your problem with the word compassionate, Helen?
Well, I just don't think it. That implies kindness. You know, I think even Andy Street, the mayor of the West Midlands, has said that he is kind of worried about his seat as a Tory politician, because he doesn't think that your average man or woman on the street thinks that the Tories are a party that cares.
When you look at those figures, what do you think, Danny?
Well, first of all, it is shocking because of the increase, and secondly, there are clearly problems related, first of all, to public funding, and secondly, to other issues like the purity of heroin, like the rise in the 1980s in use of drugs, which is now feeding through into older people's death. But I do have to take up Helen's point. What you're actually saying, looking me straight in the face and looking to Therese straight in the face, is we're not kind people, we're not compassionate people. That's simply not true. We share a different analysis to you. First of all, about how to finance the welfare system and whether you can do that. Secondly, about the complex nature of change. And also, we do share, I think Therese said that too, some bewilderment about some of the factors going into the increase in rough sleeping. Some of it definitely was to do with finance, no question about it, but not all of it. But to say, actually sitting between the two of us, that we lack compassion, that we don't care, I can tell you that I do care just as much as you, and I don't really take that kindly, honestly, to being told that what I believe is sensible, rational analysis actually is because I don't have a heart.
But I believe that you're defending policies that are at their heart lacking a heart. And I said there, Andy Street, who is the Conservative mayor for the West Midlands, he himself today has said that the Conservatives continue to have a problem in terms of this whole nasty party thing, which is still not gone away.
There's no question that that is true, and also that clearly sometimes I think people in all political parties, but certainly there are blind spots in the Conservative Party, can be blithe about things they should not be blithe about. But the idea that because we want, for example, to address the country's deficit problem and deal with it over a number of years, because it has to be dealt with, otherwise you'll have worse problems and public services will collapse. The idea that that is malice is simply not fair and not right.
Before we move on, though, organisations like Shelter have described welfare cuts, your department, as part of a perfect storm contributing to more people being on the streets. You've cut welfare by £38.1 billion a year since 2010. Do you now think that that was a mistake when you look at today's news?
No, I don't think it has been a mistake. And I'm also conscious that in the last couple of years, we've started increasing some of the elements of welfare again. It was important to make that shift, and the policy of universal credit, now rolled out across the country, is working. Of course, there are going to be some issues when it goes wrong. But
well, more than some issues, even from Conservative MPs who've said it's been one of the biggest issues in terms of their postbag of complaints.
Well, I was just about to say, and in the latest spending round, we secured an extra £40 million to share with councils where there are problems about trying to have targeted support for people with housing. So we are investing in it, absolutely.
More welfare cuts? Would you support more of those?
I don't think we need to do more welfare cuts on what we have already achieved.